I go to a lot of networking events, and I must say this is the most lively networking event I've been to in a long time. So you're doing something very, very, very right. And it is a pleasure to be here and to be joined with so many of my colleagues who I'm sure will be calling on throughout the course of this to help me answer questions that you have about some of what I might be talking about today. So thank you very much for the warm welcome. You know, before I go into the presentation, I will say it's really heartening to hear stories like the one that was just shared, and not on behalf of just PNC, but the industry as a whole, which at the moment is not a very popular industry, having just gone through what we did. But the reality is most of what bankers do, and most of the bankers you're going to encounter, really do care a lot about helping businesses succeed. That is really the function of the banking system. So I'm delighted to have heard that story shared because I think it really speaks to the core of what most bankers do and what most of them strive to achieve for their customers. But with that, I will move forward and share with you a few things. I'm not sure I'm going to get this advancing correctly. Hang on a second. Just share with you kind of a few things that we prepared to talk about. I'll try to go through it pretty quickly and then leave time for Q&A, which will really be probably much more interesting than what my prepared remarks will be. But I'll share with you a PNC overview, though I've learned many of you know a lot about us already and many of you bank with us. I'll touch very briefly upon sort of my kind of career journey. And then talk much more specifically about the business and the banking environment, and then touch on business banking, which I think would apply to many of you here in the room, and talk about some of the solutions that are out there that might be valuable and useful for you in your business. So hopefully this isn't going to feel like new information to most of you, but and many of you, I hope, know about us, or if you don't, you're curious about us. Our corporate headquarters is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which sometimes is a little surprise to some of our Philadelphia customers because they know us as PNC for over 30 years here in Philadelphia and as Provident National Bank for 100 years prior to that. And Philadelphia is the largest region within the PNC footprint, but we are not the headquarters of the corporation. That is in Pittsburgh. One of the fun facts is that by the end of this year, we will be moving into a new corporate headquarters in Pittsburgh. And it will be a 33-story building that will be the most environmentally friendly skyscraper in the world. And we're really excited about that. We happen to have more square footage that is LEED certified than any other company in the world already. So it is one of the things that we care a lot about and that we don't necessarily always talk about, but it is something that we value and spend a lot of money on. We're also the largest retail bank in Pennsylvania, and that is also something that isn't always known as well. So little pop quiz, does anyone know what PNC stands for? I used to say when I was in North Carolina, I used to say perfect for North Carolina, but now that I'm not in North Carolina anymore, I don't have to say that. Yeah, so it's not really, but it's close. It was kind of a trick question. The reality is the name came into being when we merged Provident National Bank with Pittsburgh National Bank around 1992 when the banking laws allowed us to merge as one entity in Pennsylvania. So it's kind of a trick question. It doesn't really stand for anything other than PNC, but it was a convenient way to kind of bring heritage to both organizations and not disrupt a great client reputation that we had in both cities. There's got to be a better way to advance, but I don't know it, so we'll keep doing it that way. Thought it might be interesting to share with you some of the priorities that we have at PNC in terms of our key initiatives. And of course, the main objective for us all the time, and this doesn't come and go, the main objective is to build really great product solutions for our clients and deliver really excellent customer experiences. That's the overriding objective we have every year. But beyond that, we do have some more specific things we're trying to achieve as a company. One of the areas that we're very focused on is trying to drive growth in what we refer to as our underpenetrated markets. And those would be markets that are new to PNC. Obviously, Philadephia is not new to PNC, but in 2012, we acquired the U.S. banking operations of RBC out of Canada. They were headquartered in the Southeast in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so that's an area that really we have a lot of growth opportunity because there really isn't a whole lot of business there to begin with. So we focus a lot on trying to bring the kinds of services and solutions and approach that we have in our very traditional, very mature markets like a Philadephia to a new market where maybe it's underpenetrated at the current time. So that's one of the areas. Chicago is another place where we have a lot of energy. We acquired Chicago as a market through the acquisition of National City Bank back in 2008. And that's still a work in progress for us in terms of really replicating the kind of success that we've had in markets like Philadephia. Another area that we are very focused on has to do with investment and retirement assets. And that's not really totally unique to PNC, but not surprisingly, as the population ages and creates and establishes more wealth, we need to make sure that we're focused on bringing great solutions and great partners to them to help them manage through that whole retirement, both planning as well as execution. And so it's another area of focus for us in all of our markets. Mortgage. Mortgage is a business that many of you may know PNC really did not have a mortgage business prior to 2008. We had sold it around 2002 to another company because at that time our view was it was a scale business and PNC at that point was relatively small, so we really didn't think that we could compete effectively in a scale business unless we were larger. So we sold it. Turned out to be a great decision for us because it turned out we didn't have a lot of challenges associated with having made mortgages that were not going to be able to be repaid, as many of the other financial institutions experienced. So, however, when we acquired National City, they had a mortgage company, and so we reestablished mortgage as one of the key product areas that we offer to our clients. And really, it is important for most of our retail banking clients. Purchasing a home will be the single largest financial transaction in their lifetime. For many of you as business owners, that probably seems a little surprising because you're making lots of financial decisions all the time. But for the average person, that is by far the largest decision they make. And so it's really important for us to be able to be there for our clients, to be there as a good partner to help them through the process, the decision, the financing of that very large purchase. And then the other thing that we're working through, and some of you, we were talking at our table about our Paoli branch. Some of you have probably experienced it if you've been in some of our branches recently, that retail banking is in the midst of a real transformation. The way in which our customers want to interact with us is changing, and it's changing more rapidly than the banking industry is, truthfully. They are much more interested in working with us using a mobile banking application, using ATMs, making deposits, using their mobile device. In fact, just the first half of this year, we finally reached the tipping point where we have more deposits made in the bank remotely, i.e. using either an ATM or a mobile banking device, than people coming into the branch to make a deposit. And that's up from only 38% last year. So the pace with which that transformation is happening is really increasing. So we need to be able to be there. We need to have great methods for people to bank with us other than walking into a building. In order to do that, that means we have to transform what happens in the building. We have to rethink how many buildings we need, where should they be. So we're all in the midst of this transformation as an industry, and certainly PNC as well, in thinking about how to create great customer experience remotely. And then when they do choose to come in and interact with us in person, we have the right people with the right background able to walk them through whatever it is they need to talk about. So that's very much a part of what PNC is focused on this year and have been for a couple of years and will for many years to come. So those are really the key areas in terms of initiatives, growth initiatives, as well as business initiatives that we're undertaking. The last one, the manage expenses, that's not going to be a big surprise to anybody here, I don't think. You probably are managing your expenses all the time, and certainly we are too. Efficiency is really critical to being able to invest and continue to grow and be there for our clients. So we're always looking at ways to create greater efficiencies, to leverage technology, to find new and better ways to do business and interact with our customers. So the local view, I talked about, headquartered in Pittsburgh. Of course, our headquarters here regionally is just across the street. Thank you very much. That made it very easy walking over today at 1600 Market Street. We've been there as PNC for 30 years. We have a wonderfully successful region here. It encompasses all of the outlying counties of the Philadephia area, so southeastern Pennsylvania. And then we also include southern New Jersey as part of the region. And we have offices in Cherry Hill, in Westlakes or Paoli, Wayne, Horsham. In addition to branches, we also have a number of offices to service our corporate and commercial clients as well as wealth clients. And then many of you probably have seen the operations center we have down at the airport with that very interesting sculpture on the top. No one really knows what that is, but as I understand the story is we needed to have art somewhere on the building, which I think is a very good goal. I'm just not sure that's the art I would have selected, but I'm glad that we have the center down by the airport. In terms of our ranking in the market by deposits, we are third in this region, which is sometimes surprising to people. I think many people might think that we're first or second or what have you, partly because we've been here established as PNC for so long. But in terms of deposits, we are third in this region, but continuing to make progress, as I understand it from my team, continuing to grow. This region is a very competitive region. There are a number of banks. Many of them are here, good banks, good options for customers and clients. We compete, of course, with national banks. We compete with regional banks. We compete with local, community banks. And really our approach has been pretty consistent through the last 10 to 15 years, and that is, in spite of how large we are, we're now the 5th largest by deposits nationally, we still really work hard to show up in each of our markets as a local bank. That's why I'm here. It's my job to make sure that when you encounter PNC, it feels like we're headquartered here in Philadephia, that when you're working with one of my colleagues, that they have the autonomy and the ability to make the right decisions for the market and for you as their customer. And so we do that in all 34 markets we have throughout our footprint. We have a regional president who is able to lead the team, has sort of a direct line to our CEO, and it enables us to really hopefully feel like your local bank, even though we're part of a larger organization that has scale to build products, services, has financial strength and stability. And so that's how we try to go to market, and one of the key ways in which we try to really differentiate what we do from the approach that some of the others might have. Our CEO, Bill Demchek, likes to say that we're a Main Street bank. So even though we're large, the nature of our business is really very basic. We provide services to customers, corporate customers, individuals, businesses, wealthy people, certainly the disadvantaged through community development banking. That is really what we do. We're not doing a lot of overseas investment banking for our own book. We don't do any proprietary trading and never have. And so we're really a very boring bank in many regards. But we like to think that makes us very attractive to our customers. I'm just going to list here the lines of business, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about them, but they're what you might expect. Our corporate banking, commercial banking, public finance, treasury, and institutional banking are really all part of our corporate and institutional or wholesale banking offering. The wealth management, mortgage, retail banking, they would all be part of our retail bank. But the continuum that you see within C&IB, the corporate banking, commercial banking, and so forth, are really intended to segment our team so that they are squarely focused on a particular part of the business community. So we have people who specialize in healthcare banking, for instance, back when I was running that group. We have folks who specialize in government banking or municipal finance, commercial banking, which is really around a particular size of business entity, corporate banking for the larger entities, business banking, and so forth. So we like to do that as much as we can, because what we've discovered is that when people have a very defined universe that they are supposed to be working within, they do a really great job. If the universe is too large, they tend to gravitate to just the largest, most interesting parts of that universe, and then we underserve a particular client segment. So this is really intended to make sure that we provide really great coverage to clients of all sizes and in all different industries. So I'm just going to share a very brief, and again, this is in part because there was some sense that I was supposed to talk about this. So I'll talk about it briefly, and if you want to talk about it more after, we can do that too. Just who I am and sort of how I got back here in Philadelphia. But as was mentioned earlier, I went to Rutgers College in New Brunswick. And strangely enough, I majored in economics and art history. Not the typical pathway to banking. I'm not sure there is a typical pathway to banking, or if anybody starts out knowing that's what they want to do. But somehow I ended up getting a job in banking, and at the beginning I worked for Fidelity Bank, which is now part of Wells Fargo, right here in Philadelphia. Many of you may know some of the folks who came out of that organization who are still with Wells Fargo, but also spread out all over the banking community here in Philadelphia. And most of my background has all been in sort of corporate and institutional banking, so banking companies as opposed to retail banking. And in 1990, I left then First Fidelity, and joined PNC. And while at PNC, I worked in a number of different jobs within corporate banking. And the one thing that maybe came out as part of the bio, or maybe didn't, but I've always been very open to change and taking on sort of new challenges and new opportunities. So I have moved 5 times for PNC, from Philadelphia to Kentucky to Pittsburgh to Raleigh to back to Philadelphia again. And I've worked in about 7 different segments within PNC. So insurance broker-dealer, healthcare, large corporate, middle market, regional president, treasury management, regional president. So the reason I share all that with you is just to say one of the things when I am asked to talk specifically sort of about careers and so forth, that I always talk about is how important it is to just really be willing to kind of move outside of a very traditional trajectory and kind of create your own pathway. And that should sound pretty familiar to many of you as business entrepreneurs and executives yourselves. You obviously do that on a very regular basis by being an entrepreneur and running your own businesses. So, and as was mentioned, I rejoined the Philadelphia market last September when my predecessor here, Bill Mills, retired. Many of you may know Bill. I think he spoke at the group at one time. Bill decided to retire, and so my boss asked me if I would move back up to Philadelphia, and I couldn't think of a better thing to do. So I was like, absolutely, I'd love to come back to Philadelphia. So that's my pathway. So I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, just the whole issue of the competitive landscape in banking here in Philadelphia and southern New Jersey. It really is a very competitive marketplace, and that should be good for all of you. You should be very happy about that. And actually, it's good for all of us in the banking industry as well, truthfully, because it really makes us work hard and be innovative about what we're trying to do. So, which is really much more interesting than kind of just showing up every day. The point of this slide is not to make you have to read it, but to share with you that it's a very competitive landscape, and the breadth of organization that we compete against is very broad in terms of size and scale. One trend that I do think we're going to continue to see, and that is consolidation among smaller banks. The regulatory environment is very, very fierce and very expensive to comply with. And when you can spread that expense over a very large base, it's much more manageable. The smaller your base, the harder it is to spread that expense. So you will see combinations of smaller banks, trying to reach a critical mass that enable them to deal with that regulatory burden. The other piece that I think is particularly challenging for some of our smaller banks is just the retail banking environment. Deposits do not have in the current rate environment, do not have the same value that they sometimes do in terms of being able to generate opportunity for lending and creating spread. So because of that, many of us fall back on lots of other capabilities that we have to help sort of fill the gap. The fewer other options you have, the harder it is to fill that gap during a prolonged period of low rates that we're currently in. So I do think we'll continue to see some continued consolidation in the industry. In terms of the very large banks, of course, as you know, many of them are precluded from making acquisitions or joining forces. PNC as an institution falls somewhere in the center there. So we're large, but we're still well off the top four in terms of our size, which enables us to still at least consider the opportunity of whether or not an acquisition would make sense. So we wanted to share with you some information about what's going on in business banking specifically. And one of the things that we do is a survey twice a year among business owners. In Pennsylvania, we survey about 150 small business owners twice a year, not the same ones, obviously. And I thought I might share with you some of what we heard from them most recently and see if this resonates with what you're experiencing as well. There's got to be another way to do this so I don't. When we looked at the current view locally here in the region, we tried to get a sense of the optimism, the sense of ongoing investment, what they were thinking about as important issues for them. And one of the things we learned is 80% are optimistic about their company's prospects, and 64% said they're optimistic about the local economy. I do think, as I understand it, the Philadephia region, the economy has lagged a little bit in terms of the recovery. It hasn't been as robust, and it hasn't happened as early on as in some other areas. The benefit, of course, is that the economy is large and very diverse, which means you don't have a lot of volatility. So it's going to move a little more slowly in either direction. So it's good to hear that there's optimism, and certainly optimism about the local economy. Another area we discovered 36% of business owners indicated they're optimistic about profits increasing, and that's the most that we have seen since 2012. So that's also a very good sign. Again, don't know if that resonates with what you're expecting as well. So. As you can also see from the chart, many of the business owners continue to be very thoughtful about managing their assets and managing their sort of core cash flow assets and liabilities. So I would expect that to continue to be the case, and maybe that's what you're experiencing as well. I'm going to go through this pretty briefly because presumably it'd be much more interesting to talk about it in a Q&A fashion of what you might want to hear about. But we thought we would share with you some of the banking services we offer and some of the approach that we would have in terms of providing services to businesses like yourselves. At the core, we really are confident that succeeding for our clients really only happens when we have a really robust conversation with them. Getting to know them, understanding their challenges, understanding what their aspirations are. We certainly, like anyone else, can go through a laundry list of products and services that we can offer to you, but we really think it's much more valuable if we get a better understanding of what you want to do and then go back and think about what's most appropriate to talk with you about to help you achieve your specific goals. So a lot of new business owners, start out by just thinking about like, okay, how close is the nearest bank? How easy is it for me to make a deposit? Is there a walk, a drive-through? How is all that going to work? But we really think the more valuable approach is to think about who's going to be a partner for you and do they have solutions that are going to be useful to you in the long run. And of course, PNC, like many other banks, offers some very basic business checking, payroll processing, merchant services, loans, cash management services, equipment finance. So we offer all of those products. But the real key is what kind of conversation you're having with your banker about what you want to achieve and how you want to get there. So certainly the first thing that most business owners start with is a checking account, and there are many different options in terms of what sort of checking account you need. But the one thing that we're really clear about with most of our clients is to advise them not to commingle their personal funds with their business funds. And my sense is most of you here are not doing that. But you'd be surprised at how many people do start out that way and then kind of have to figure out how to separate those two at the right time. So the real question is, how can PNC help their business clients? And one of the solutions that we launched last year that we really think is particularly valuable to our business banking clients is a product called Cash Flow Insight. And this is a mobile banking application that enables you to really manage your business remotely, so wherever you are. And it helps you with tools that help to predict what your cash flows in are going to be and what your cash flows out are going to be, to really enable you in a very user-friendly way to know what to anticipate. Am I going to need to borrow money? Am I going to have excess funds? What is that going to look like? Where am I going to get it? Have I planned for that? And so it's a wonderful tool that's very easy to use, that really provides that kind of insight as to what your cash flow is going to be over the coming week, month, couple of months, 3 months, and so forth. And it's one of those solutions that we have found many of our clients really find useful, particularly if they're not sitting behind a desk full time. They can take it with them wherever they go. And I'm not going to go through this either. So this is, traditional solutions, credit cards, debit cards, certainly credit cards that can be used as a purchasing vehicle for your business and for your employees to make purchases if they're so authorized. All around a lot of risk management and security to make sure that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands or the wrong purchases are made. Then we have merchant processing services, which enable you to interact with your customers in a way that is efficient for you and effective for them as well. Whether you need to accept credit and debit card payments or provide them the ability to purchase gift cards, maybe you have a launch on a website for online payments. All of those can be facilitated through the merchant service platform. And last but not least, no, I shouldn't say last but not least, but I know what's near and dear to many, and certainly the lifeblood for a lot of businesses is, of course, the ability to borrow to help expand their business or support the business that they currently have. So we have many different financing solutions to support a lot of different types of needs that you might have, lines of credit, term loans, and certainly lots of other options. And again, this all really starts with a conversation with your business banker to really help you think through where you want to take your business and what it is that the banker can do to help you get there. Small business lending, again, another area in which, if it's applicable, we certainly have the ability to provide that. There are times when it's a great fit, and your banker would certainly be prepared to explore that with you should that be the right solution. And one of the things that typically does happen to a lot of business owners, they stay so focused on managing their business, taking care of their employees, 401k, whatever it might be. They spend so much time on that they neglect their own personal financial situation. And so that's an area where typically we would be bringing in someone from our wealth team to help you think through, having separated the two. What does that look like? Do you need to think about a liquidity event at some point? Are you managing toward the goals you have personally as well as the goals that you have for your business? So Larry Worth is the executive who runs our business banking team, but as you heard earlier during introductions, I have a number of colleagues with me from our business banking team, and they're also here with me to answer any questions you have during Q&A, or certainly offline if you want to ask any one of us a question about something that we might help you with. We're more than happy to do that as well. And that's all I have prepared for you.